从借鉴其他国家经验到成为其他国家学习榜样，他称赞中国在气候变化、数字经济等方面发挥引领作用，肯定中国改革开放所取得的成就。他看好绿色发展和数字化转型所释放出的潜力。高端访谈独家专访国际货币基金组织总裁克里斯塔琳娜·格奥尔基耶娃。敬请收看。
关注国际焦点，洞察世界风云。大家好，欢迎收看本期高端访谈，我是王冠。今年以来，国际货币基金组织连续2次上调对本年度全球经济增长的预期，认为全球经济继续表现出令人瞩目的韧性，经济实现软着陆的信心增强。但与此同时，全球经济增长前景仍然面临着物价上升、高利率、地缘政治紧张局势等下行风险。在这样的背景下，各国应该如何携手应对挑战？哪些因素对于促进全球经济发展至关重要？如何克服全球化带来的发展不均衡的问题？而中国经济的稳步前行将为世界经济发展提供哪些动力？今天我们的对话嘉宾是国际货币基金组织总裁克里斯塔琳娜·格尔基耶娃，让我们一起在对话中寻找答案。Madam Georgieva, thank you so much for making this interview and welcome back to Beijing.
Thank you very much. A great honor to be with you.
The IMF forecast this January updated the global economic forecast to 3.1%, slightly higher than the October forecast, saying that a soft landing is possible. How did the IMF reach that conclusion? What are the biggest risks ahead, though?
We have carefully observed 2 data points. One, the strength of consumer demand and also the spending from governments that has been quite resilient. And 2, we looked at the trends in growth in major economies. And what we have concluded is that the world economy is remarkably resilient despite the hits from COVID, from the war in Ukraine, from the inflationary spike that led to higher interest rates. We are seeing a performance that is better than we expected it to be a year ago. 2 important trends. One, inflation is going down in many economies where it has spiked the previous year. 2, we are seeing labor markets holding quite firm. What does it mean? It means that people have jobs, and that means they spend. And the result is reinforcement of this better growth prospect. But first, the central banks still have a very difficult task ahead. We are poised for a soft landing, haven't landed just yet. And they have to carefully calibrate based on data when to start cutting interest rates, by how much, and they cannot look at the other central bank for inspiration because countries are now in very different places. 2, for fiscal authorities, this is a very difficult moment. They have to rebuild buffers because they spent and spent and spent in the previous years. At the same time, they need to support the green and digital transformation of their economies. And when we look at the picture, what is most concerning is, yes, growth is positive, but it is weak. Global growth of 3%, around 3% year after year after year, is way below what we had prior to COVID. Prior to COVID, average growth was 3.8%. So we are faced with a bit of relief, economy is doing better, and at the same time, very challenging environment for decision makers.
国际货币基金组织，简称 IMF， 成立于1945年，目前拥有190个成员国。该组织致力于促进各成员国之间的货币合作、贸易发展和经济增长。格奥尔基耶娃是国际货币基金组织自成立以来第一位来自东欧地区的女总裁。她曾在保加利亚索菲亚国家经济与世界经济大学任教，从1993年起到世界银行工作，后赴欧盟委员会任职。格奥尔基耶娃在国际发展与金融领域经验丰富，曾经到访和驻任过60多个国家。
Can you explain to them what exactly is the IMF and what does it do?
The IMF, International Monetary Fund, is an organization that brings many countries, now 190 countries, together to support each other. When one country is in a difficulty, it can call on the IMF for help, but also to inform decision making in monetary policy, what the central banks are doing, in fiscal policy, taxes, spending, and in financial sector policy. Make sure that there is no financial crisis to threaten us. What we are...
It's like a big medical institution doing health checkups for individuals.
You put your finger exactly on the right way to describe it. We go every year to visit each and every one of our members to do a health check of their economies. And then we say, well, your blood pressure is a little high. You should take some measures to bring it down.
On global trade, there have been many observations describing what's happening, short chaining, friendshoring, de-risking. And many believe they're based not on sound economics, but on ideological and geopolitical calculations. As an economist by training, how do you feel about all this?
Some of this desire to multiply the sourcing of goods is justified. We don't want to be in a situation in which, say, a natural disaster cuts off supply chain and there is no alternative. Some of it is overblown concern about the dependency on others for your domestic economy. As an economist, I would say loud and clear, we need division of labor, we need trade. So we bring the cost of what we produce and consume down, we expand the choices we have, and we create better opportunities and better standard of living for people around the world.
In your Cambridge speech titled The Economic Possibilities for My Grandchildren, you laid out 2 scenarios for the next 100 years, and those are very, very different scenarios, with one being a very low ambition target, the other on the higher end. Can you elaborate for our audience?
So what I did with this speech is to take inspiration from John Maynard Keynes, who in 1930, in the midst of the Depression, wrote his vision for his grandchildren. 100 years later, his projection that technology and accumulation of capital would lift up living standards 8 times has materialized. 100 years later, we live longer, we are healthier, we have better opportunities, higher standard of living. And if we cooperate, if we work more together, then the world would be 13 times better off. I'm an optimist. I believe that my granddaughter would live in a more prosperous world.
That is the aspiration, the hope, the wish of all of us, I would argue. On China, China recently announced a whole host of measures targeting its economy, trying to stimulate growth and reassure global investors, including the policies announced at the CDF and the 2 sessions, the political meetings. How do you assess China's policy mix to spur growth?
Well, China has been remarkably successful over the last 4 decades. Reforms and opening up have been paying back to the Chinese people quite significantly. And when we look forward, it is again reforms that would unleash the potential for green and digital growth. I am a big believer that the combination of market forces and allocation of resources to increase productivity of capital and productivity of labor, that combination can drive positive growth. And I see in China today a shift from high growth rates to high quality of Chinese growth. And I'm, from what I hear from the leadership of China, that determination to step up a reform momentum is going to deliver, again, prosperity to the Chinese people.
A new quality productive forces, as you may have heard, Madam Georgieva, has been a buzzword in China's recent policy meetings, a term coined by the Chinese president, President Xi. How do you look at this new quality productive forces in transforming the Chinese economy into a high-quality one?
Well, it is very clear that China is making a significant investment in the green economy, in the digital economy, and also in leveling the playing field between state-owned enterprises and the private sector. So that direction is the right one, because look at the world, and that was actually the reason I did the speech on in Cambridge. What is the world lacking today? Productivity growth, and on that basis, increasing standard of living. How can we yet again energize productivity growth? By embracing the force of technology, by investing in human capital, and China is well positioned for that.
You believe that's happening in China going forward?
I see in China, it's very interesting to be in China today. I see in China a very important moment for the Chinese people. You have benefited from phenomenal growth. That leads to a whole generation of Chinese people that have only seen the economy going up, incomes doubling and tripling. That, of course, cannot go forever, because like any other country, the economy matures, and there has to be that shift from high growth to quality of growth. And I think it is important for the Chinese people to recognize that they're going into a new era for China, in which there wouldn't be 10, 12, 15% growth rates, but there would be enormous enhancement of opportunities and again, increase in standard of living.
中国是国际货币基金组织的创始国之一，长期以来，中国与国际货币基金组织保持良好合作。2016年10月1日，人民币正式加入国际货币基金组织特别提款权货币篮子，与美元、欧元、英镑和日元一起跻身全球储备货币之列，成为仅次于美元和欧元的第3大权重货币。特别提款权这个篮子里第一次出现了新兴经济体的身影，自此不再是发达国家俱乐部。人民币入篮是中国积极参与全球治理、为世界发展做出积极贡献的体现。 随着综合国力的提升，中国正在越来越广泛地参与到新的国际治理体系的构建当中。发起成立亚洲基础设施投资银行和新开发银行等多边金融机构，这些中国方案都得到了国际社会，特别是发展中国家的赞誉和支持。
You've been to China many times, and you're in fact the first managing director of the IMF from a transition economy state. Having observed China on multiple occasions and through multiple platforms, what do you think of the Chinese path to modernization and its value perhaps to the developing world?
What China has done so successfully is not only to increase standard of living, but to make it so that everybody in China benefits. The focus on eradication of poverty created a society in which dignity of life is respected everywhere, in the big urban centers, in the rural areas. What I saw is that tremendous transformation in China being spread in this country for the benefit of people who started from a very, very difficult place. What we learn from China and we transmit to other countries is this ability to take a long-term view and then invest in infrastructure, in people, in rule of law, in competition, so opportunities are lifted up and people can reach their full potential. And you know what is so interesting? I travel around the world and I see models of development that have come out of China replicated in other places. For example, there is a project here in China, Loss Plateau, that is terracing barren land so it can become productive to give livelihoods to people. That same project I saw in Ethiopia. So being my institution, the IMF, my previous one, the World Bank, being a transmission line of experience, we actually helped what you have achieved in China to turn into knowledge and success stories in other parts of the world.
On many occasions, you emphasized international cooperation, including in your Cambridge speech, a point that is actually consistent with and echoed by the Chinese leadership. If you look at President Xi's initiatives for the world, which is really the organizing principle of China for the world, including the Global Development Initiative, Global Security Initiative, and Global Civilization Initiative, and building a community of shared future. How would you evaluate China's role to multilateralism?
China is a very active member of the international community, very active member of our organization, of the International Monetary Fund. And it does it based on its own experience. China benefited from learning from the institutions that have that role of bringing members together, and is now supporting others to learn. At the IMF, China has been a very engaged member of discussing the right policy choices, monetary policy, fiscal policy, financial sector policy. China has contributed to the instruments of the IMF that we deployed very actively during COVID to help our most vulnerable members. And China takes an important leadership role on issues that are essential for the future of mankind. Climate change, the digital economy, how to sustain a more integrated global economy. So in that sense, a country that has benefited from learning from others is now a source of lessons for others itself.
On artificial intelligence, you said today's generative AI can reinvigorate the global economy, calling it a big bang moment. How do you see its promises versus risks?
The problem we face of low productivity and weak growth needs a solution, and artificial intelligence can be a big part of this solution. It can increase productivity tremendously. What we recommend is that we act early to prepare for this world that is already here, in which artificial intelligence plays an increasingly significant role. And we look at 4 things: digital infrastructure, human capital, innovation, regulation, and ethics. And when we look in a comprehensive way, what I can say to your viewers is that China, among the emerging markets, is best prepared.
On climate change, Madam Managing Director, we've just had COP28 in Dubai, and there was a consensus reached. Are you satisfied with the consensus? And how do you look at China's fight against climate change?
COP28 was a very good, very successful COP. It did 3 things that were very necessary. First, recognition that the nationally determined contributions were falling short of what is necessary to prevent the climate crisis. And now we know that countries are working on upgrading their ambition, especially for this decade. China is also doing it. Second, financing. COP28 recognized that unless we rapidly mobilize massive investments in the green transformation, in particular in emerging markets and developing economies, we would run out of time. And 3, it has renewed that sense of unity, that countries can come together, that instead of pointing fingers at each other, we can hold hands, because we are in this together. And only together we can reverse course. China has taken very seriously its obligations to advance technology in some areas like solar panels, renewable energy overall, electric vehicles. China is now a leader.
And also for our digital viewers, there are a whole lot of them, millennials, Generation Z, watching this program. They may have a few simple questions to ask you, if you don't mind. You've been to China many times. They want to ask you what have impressed you, of course, here in the mind, but what have also touched you here in the heart about China?
What impressed me the most is this incredible dynamism that radiates from China. How people put their hearts and their minds in solving problems, and how the country changes every time I come. Whoa, there is a new ring road, there are new opportunities, new job opportunities, better living conditions. That is incredible. That what you have achieved in China is just incredible. What I find most enjoyable in China is to engage with people, with the leadership, and with ordinary people. And I can tell you that nothing beats Chinese hospitality. It is just wonderful.
And then the second question they have is, what is your favorite Chinese food? What part of the Chinese culture that intrigues you the most?
Food. So I'm going to be very boring here because I really like a lot Peking duck.
That's a good choice.
I also like a lot hot pot. I learned that to enjoy it, and I'm trying to teach my Bulgarian family that this is really great. You go and you sit together and then you cook together.
And you should go to southern China, Chongqing and Chengdu, for the real spicy ones.
I hear that if I want spicy, this is where I need to go. What I enjoy is Lunar New Year celebration. It's just wonderful. I find this really bringing serious people like me into a world of wonders. It's just great.
Madam Georgieva, thank you so much for your time. It's wonderful to see you again.
Thank you. 谢谢。
谢谢 Thank you.
在专访中，格奥尔基耶娃表示，中国的发展成就、中国社会所迸发出的活力，以及中国人民的热情，让他印象深刻。他认为中国是国际社会的积极贡献者，也是国际货币基金组织的重要参与者。在气候变化、数字经济、促进全球经济一体化等领域，中国都发挥了举足轻重的引领作用，为其他国家提供了可以学习和借鉴的案例。好，感谢收看本期高端访谈，我是王冠，我们下期再会。